Hey everybody, it's Marty the JavaScript Party and my buddy Rhett, and I have her a couple pieces of a nut that I cracked for her. It's two pieces, and I'm going to give them to her. And it is Monday. I have today off because it is Labor Day. And the thing that you should really consider about these holidays, and I really have only thought about this maybe the last year or two, is when we have a holiday that is sort of a way of like communicating that what we're doing isn't normal, right? So like everyone having in the U.S., we typically work about 40 hours a week. Um, you know, there's sort of limits on what people that you work for are allowed to tell you to do. I have a funny story of a friend who is from India. Who's one of the nicest people I've literally one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Um, and he was telling me that when he moved to the U.S., he's quite affluent, and he was actually a very very good computer programmer, and he worked QA. He was a QA professional when I met him. But he was telling me when he came to the U.S. that he wanted to buy a convenience store. So we have these stores. I think they're all over the world, but basically they just sell sort of very convenient things, but they're expensive. They cost more than it would because you're paying for the convenience. Um, and he wanted to buy one and all that, and then he found out that you're actually in the U.S. you're not allowed to beat your employees. Like if someone shows up late to work, you're not allowed to like take a stick and hit them with it or something like that. That's just completely and utterly outlawed. Another thing that a girl was telling me, who is from India, um, and when you talk about India, you have to realize that in the U.S. we have a lot of diversity, right? Like, so one person's experience in Texas is going to be very different than another person's experience in New York City, which is going to be very, very different than a person's experience in Washington State. And India, I think, puts us to shame on that. Like, they have massive amounts of different ways of living. Like, I talked to people who were like in structured schooling from the bottom for their entire life, to other people who like they all their schools, like their school happened under a banyan tree, I think she said. Like literally every kid went to this gigantic tree, and that's where they had all their school, right? So you're just going to have every different kind of life. So I'm not saying that this is in India, but wherever this person was from, she was telling me that like any random adult is allowed to um, punish any random child if they're disrespectful, if they steal something, if they misbehave in any way. Just it's sort of expected that any other adult who's around them can give them spankings. I actually heard the same thing about like in a friend of mine went to some small island in Jamaica, and he was telling me that a kid ran into a street, and a random adult gave the kid a spanking, because they didn't want them to get hurt running the streets. So anyways, that's not something that does not happen. As far as I've never ever seen that happen here in the United States. So, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but like I've lived in many many places here in the States that never happens here. But anyway, so we have Labor Day, and you just have to. It's sort of a reminder that like you know we some people really fought so that we could have a nice work environments and all that, and we should definitely appreciate those people that fought for it, and also keep in mind that it's something that we could lose too. So I thank you people who got Labor Day, who got our work situation for us. I'm glad. Like another thing is like children can't work in the U.S. Now I got to work when I was a little kid. When I was like 10 years old, I used to work at a farm and get paid. But now children, and I think that's still the case. I think you can still work at a farm and like pick food and stuff, but you can't work like in a factory or something like that. So that is that. We finished up unit tests. I do have to say that like when I first started this project, I thought I was pretty good at unit tests because I'd done spent many many hours doing unit tests. But like if I coded for a 3 days, I probably had at least 10 days of unit tests. And this last time I coded for like 6 days and I only had 1 day of unit tests. So 6 days is 6 sessions. So 6 hours of code, I was able to do all the unit testing for it in 1 hour. So I've always been sort of very skeptical of unit testing in general because I've just felt like it wasn't worth the amount of time that it took. But if you really get if you really get good at it and you try really hard and you get the basics down, um, you can actually get pretty good at. You can get where it doesn't take nearly as long, and so maybe I need to sort of think through that because if you're good at it, if you learn how to get good at it, then it might be worth it may be worth it, probably worth it. I don't know. So then I ran my end-to-end tests because I want to do the end tests so I can do a commit, and I found a problem. And the problem is, like, if I add this and I add another one and then I go like this and then I hit tab, 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 I go here. So that got discovered because I one thing I would like is for this to be able to be doable from a keyboard, and so this is a problem. And I think it's going to be an easy solution to fix this. I believe I saw that these have a tab index of 2 and these don't have a tab index at all. So I believe if I set these to 2, it will put them in the tab order and it will tab the right way. The other question is, I think you can hit enter. And I think when I did, I don't know that I ever did that. But so I definitely want to go back I want to get that fixed. So it's a couple ways to think through this. I would normally go like this. I would right click on this update button. I would do an inspect. And then I would work my way up the tree till I found the component. And it looks like the component that is holding this is called app tabular layout. So then I would do a search. Additionally, I can try to imagine architecturally where this might be. And so it's definitely, I don't really remember all of the places in this application, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be inside the components. And then I don't have any. It's possible that there would be like maybe a like a buttons section or something like that, but I don't see a buttons section. So let's probably in layouts, and then we know that this is the tabular layout, and we know that we made changes in here. So this is probably a pretty good thing. And so it looks like it's up in here. Up in here. Up in here. So, but this is just the app viz. We know that's not it. Oh, so wrong one. So that's definitely the wrong one. So it's an app. So I opened the wrong one. It's an app tabular layout. I think I got distracted because there's the coloring here indicates that there was changes, and I was assuming that there was a good chance that it was what I was working on. So here we go. This is what we have, and see we have tab index set of 2 there, but over here we didn't set a tab index, and here we didn't set a tab index. Now I have all kinds of conflicting things. Like I typically would not want to do something like this in the same commit that I made changes in. I would like this to be in its own commit. So typically I think if we're in a professional environment, what we want to do is create a bug for this specific issue and write it and try to get it assigned, because the sooner it gets assigned the better, so that it's in its own commit, so that if something gets wonky with things, it's easy for whoever's kind of looking over all the commits to try to figure out which commit made the wonkiness. But I also have this other thing where it's like, oh, I want to have all my unit tests and all my end-to-end tests done and working properly before I do a commit. So I have like 2 conflicting goals there. And so I'm just going to, since I'm working by myself, I'm just going to go with that. And I'm going to say tab index of 2. So I think what we're starting to work into a pattern of is that like everything that's up in here is going to have like a tab index of 1. And then everything that's down in here is going to have a tab index of 2 if it's in the body. And then maybe, yes, yeah, that's probably how that's going to work. But I think this is going to fix it. I'm not 100%. And then additionally, I think back when I first started doing this, I think no tab index was got higher priority than a tab index of 2. But it looks like that has shifted since I sort of learned this stuff. And that is like, par for the course. That's the kind of thing that happens all the time. Right. So let's let this build. And I guess they did not see this as it changed, so it'll be interesting to see if it's fixed now. Oh, it is. Wow, so they actually redrew everything behind the scenes, and see now our tab index works our tabbing works properly. So that is good. Simple fix is kind of fix that if you miss it would get harder with time, because as things get more complicated, if you don't, it's easier to kind of figure out every individual fix than to try to figure them out once you've got a big mess and a bunch of stuff. So we fixed that issue. So let's go ahead and run our end-to-end test again and see if we see anything else. And then we need to probably write some new stuff, but I'll probably do that tomorrow. So hopefully this is going to be a really short video. So npm run Cypress open. So this is defined in my package.json. This right here. And I guess since we have some time, I might as well go over there and show you. So that is this guy, npm Cypress open. And when I installed Cypress, it ran it. I mean, it set these up. Now, I will say that I would never do this again. I'll never do this again unless forced. And this is, I will never install Cypress in the same application as Angular. And that's because Cypress as a language cares what version of TypeScript you have, and so does Angular. And those can get out of sync. And I have never had any problems with it, but man, would that be, if you have that problem, that would be just a nasty problem to try to fix. So I personally will never do that again. I'll definitely keep my Cypress. And that's kind of how I set up at work. Mostly, I only set it up at work that way because I haven't gotten buy-in from management or anybody to have that in our application. But I'm glad I didn't, because it is totally separate, and it's kind of nice because I can actually write Cypress tests that jump across applications, and sometimes you need that. So that's good. So here we go. The very first one, getting it started takes a while, and then the first test takes a long time. And we can't really tell. Did we like inadvertently break something? I seriously doubt it, but it's possible. And the Cypress will fix it. And technically, I probably should also rerun my unit test, but I cannot see how making a change in the markup that's just literally just a property would ever cause the problem. So let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. It's taking a while. I know another thing that I definitely want to fix is something doesn't seem to be getting deleted properly when I delete. And it would be it's the kind of thing that is going to be a real pain in the butt to figure out. So this is the one where we ran into issues. It's kind of weird because I didn't see the issue. That's so crazy. Um, I think in the keyboard, once we get here, we want to tab or whatever, um, and resize. It may very well have been in one of the other tests where it sort of presented itself. So that's pretty cool. Reflow. Delete. I wonder if this is the one where it came out. And update. Maybe it was this one. Nope, and routing. All right. So tomorrow I would like to expand keyboard to click through and make sure that after you click on a visualization, you get the edit but update button, and then you if you move again, you get the um, delete button. Now, before, I'm just going to say this. Okay, so we're done with that for now. Oh, and then I also want the update. If I run this update one, I want it to check. And see in this case, the aspect ratio is 3.003 because it's so much shorter than it is wide. So this little area. So I think it would be cool, and I don't know how feasible this is for my test to get the width and the height and do its own division and then do a calculation to see that they match. Which that sort of math can be a bit tricky because it could be off by a little bit. Maybe I'll just make sure that it matches to 2 digits if that ends up being a problem. So there's that. And then the other issue that I'm not going to try to figure out tomorrow, but I hope I can remember to try to figure that out as this comes along is, so let's refresh this thing. Let's add one of these, and then let's update. You see we are going to 1, right? So now let's go back to here. Let's delete it. And I think it should do, and maybe I'll prove myself wrong, what I believe I should do is when I delete this, I come back and I go to update. That should be a 1 still, because we just deleted everything. So for some reason, it appears that something's going wrong in the delete process. So that would be a good one, A, to fix, and B, to test, to write an end-to-end test that, hey, when you delete it, you get the number, you create one, you get the number, remember the number that was in the URL, delete it, then create a new one and make sure that it's the same as the previous number, because we're supposed to recycle IDs. And I think that's going to end up being really important if we ever have thousands and thousands of meshes and stuff like that. It's going to be, I think it's going to be one of those very difficult, mind-bending sort of debugging experiences to try to figure that out. Like, I'm going to have to lean really heavily on my sort of normal way of coding, which is like investigative, detective work, figuring out exactly what's wrong and then doing it. I do not think that the other sort of side of coding where you think things more in an infrastructure way or more in a architectural way, and I think those are different. But if you kind of come at it from those directions, I don't think that you'll be well served to solving an issue like this, because I don't think it's an infrastructure or an architecture issue. I think it's just a pure coding issue, and it's going to be a doozy, I think. But one should definitely be, and then one thing I would think would be nice in the future is once you create a new one, or if you come here and it refreshes and it was 1 and then you create a new one, it should update and draw. So if you were to just hit this, you'd be able to do that. And then it'd be nice if this screen, like if there was nothing, you had like just hey, there aren't any, blah, 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 blah. Or if you're looking at an ID that doesn't exist, it says, hey, that ID doesn't exist, but we have these other IDs, if there's other IDs. So that is that. That makes this a pretty short and sweet video. So I can go on with my day. It's been a while since I've gotten a nice short, sweet video. But I think this is definitely a win for end-to-end testing. This would be much, 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 much more difficult to develop if we if if the tab indexing and keyboard stuff, if you let it go, becomes almost impossible. Because you can set up some situations or some workflows that just are not feasible from the keyboard. It is possible to set that up because there's just so much more flexibility in a mouse move and all that. So you kind of need, if you want the keyboard to work, you really do need to constrain and always make sure that that is the case. And you know, honestly, very, 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 very few organizations have applications that work well with keyboards. And then many times, if they work well with keyboards, it has to be like, what am I trying to say? It has to be like some very, very convoluted, difficult to maintain system. You know, like at some point you get to the point where like you have to create like almost like a huge difference engine or something like that that knows how to debug through, or knows how to like goes, oh, okay, I just got a tab, I'm here, what is the lookup for that? And then you end up having logic like, oh, well, if we're in this mode and you're leaving this, then you're supposed to go to that one, but if we're at that one, but if they don't have these permissions, things it can become really, really hard. And it almost always becomes necessary at some point. So I would definitely strongly suggest keeping a close eye on your keyboard interactions. Anyways, happy coding, everybody. Bye.